to Sister Wives episode 1. Buckle up, this is a longer one. And hi, if you're new here, my name's Ben. I grew up on a Mormon polygamous compound. I escaped that shit. I'm now a comic out here in the wicked world. And I also happen to be one of the many nephews of the Sister Wives family. I'm watching the Sister Wives show for the first time, and I'm telling you what I think about it. At the risk of pointing out the obvious, the intro did not age well. The twinkling music, Kody talking, my family, I can't wait for you to meet my family. It was a little gross. It felt like a hyper-romanticization of the idea of family without actually engaging in the reality of your family.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Monday, June 24th, 2024, and for the very first time ever, I have watched a video by a family member of the Browns, a nephew of Kody Brown, other than one of his kids, but someone that doesn't have an NDA, isn't afraid of saying it like it is, isn't concerned about a show getting canceled, certainly isn't bound by protecting their family. And his nephew, Ben, gave a decent recap of polygamy and the first episode of Sister Wives. Last week, I shared with you his initial reaction where he was kind of laughing about how the whole show is going to be about Kody trying to force a mistress into his family. And this specific recap is more about his disgust with Kody and the fact that the whole show is about Kody. And he had some very pointed words and thoughts about Kody. And I will say this is very different than Ben a couple years ago. I actually spoke to Ben via a Zoom a couple years ago, and he was actually going to come on my channel. And lo and behold, he had found out who I was and that his family didn't like me, and he canceled. It's good to see him using a platform and speaking about the show and about polygamy in a way that can reach people. And as a male, his perspective is unique because he can speak to what it's like to be a man in the system, what it's like to be a child that's been trafficked, what it's like to be a child that's been neglected, what it's like to be a boy that's cast out of the system. And in this recap, he had a lot to say. So in the beginning, you just saw that he called it kind of gross, the way that Kody was positioning this of the show, like that it was one big family and that Kody maybe liked the idea of a family, but in practice wasn't very good at having a family. Here's some other stuff that he said.
I think that he's in love with the idea of having a really big, awesome family and not actually doing the work of engaging in the real relationships of that family. It actually reminds me of my dad quite a lot. My dad had this shirt that he wore all the time growing up where it said, anyone can be a father. It takes someone special to be a daddy, which he took as being like he was a daddy, right? Like he was a special person. He wasn't just a father, he was a daddy. But he never did any of the things that a daddy would do. Like he never played with me with my Legos. That's what I would have wanted from my daddy. He never did that. If I were to ask him today what one of my favorite things as a kid was, it was dinosaurs. I doubt that he could tell you. Meaning that he didn't actually know who I was. He just liked the idea of being a dad. But being a dad is more than just an idea. It's actually engaging in the lives of your children and taking an interest in them and helping them out. None of which my dad did, and it doesn't really seem like that's how Kody shows up either.
Something that he said kind of resonated with me when he was talking about how if you were to ask his dad right now what his favorite thing was as a child, he probably wouldn't know or remember because he didn't know, because he wasn't doing the things that a normal dad would do with him because he wasn't around and he was always working or he had other wives. And so the concept of they like the idea of being a dad and they like the idea of having a family, they just don't want to engage in the family itself. They're just looking at the kid as something that represents a number, a family to them. They're not an individual. And This is something that I've talked about a lot on this channel, about how in this system, the way it's designed, there's just no space for time. There's no time, in fact. Men don't have the time to engage with the kids. And the kids are not viewed in the same capacity as kids are in our world. So a normal father that has one spouse and wants to have a child would be there every day if they're in a partnership, that they're still together, and would engage with that child and hopefully have a good relationship with that child and play with the child and know about the child. But in polygamy, they don't. And when they do show up, it's late and they're tired and they want sex, and the kids are an afterthought. And Ben actually goes further into this. So he talks about how there isn't enough time in polygamy for dads to be good dads. And there's not enough time for anyone because everyone is so taxed out. And, you know, for the very first time, you're actually hearing someone from his family say, listen, my dad wasn't a good dad, and I don't think Kody's a good dad. I think he likes the idea of being a dad. I just don't think he is a good dad because he doesn't engage with them.
And the catchphrase, love should be multiplied, not divided, is stupid and dumb. Because what is love if not attention and time? And you have finite attention and time as a parent, as a spouse. And so if you are dividing up that attention and time among 18 children and 4 wives, it is divided. So you can spout all of the lovely nonsense of like, oh, we're multiplying our love. But the actual reality is that you're not spending time with those family relationships because you have too many of them. That's actually one of my biggest problems with polygamy as a lifestyle in general, is that it's not good for children because children require a lot of attention, and you don't get a lot of attention when you're a polygamous child. You get very little. And not only do you get very little, the older children often end up becoming the parents of the younger children, which is exactly what we saw in episode 1 with Logan. Logan is essentially acting as the dad of his siblings. His mom wakes up early, goes to work. He gets up, makes the kids breakfast, gets them ready for school, sends them off to school. And you hear, and he's just dutifully doing it because he's a good fucking kid. And then you hear him at the end, he's like, yeah, this is pretty much how it goes. That's pretty much how it goes in big families like that.
Finally, an adult in the Brown family saying it, that polygamy is not good for children. Even though Christine, Janelle, and Mary have left, they still do not acknowledge the fact that the system of polygamy was detrimental to their children. They don't acknowledge that their kids could have had a better life had they been raised in monogamy. They still praise the way that their family worked, and they are glad that things worked out the way that they did. They wouldn't do anything differently. But in the same breath, they'll say that Kody wasn't around as very much. He didn't give equal time to the children. So it's like, you'll hear them say like, I wouldn't change anything, and polygamy still worked until it didn't work. But then you also hear them say, Kody was never around. Kody was over at Robyn's. My kids felt preferential treatment. So really polygamy didn't work. And Ben's like, yeah, it doesn't work because there's not enough time. You have too many relationships. You got too many kids. You have too many wives. You literally cannot spend enough time with anyone. And your kids end up being raised by their siblings because there's so many children, and moms are either sad, depressed, lonely, or completely having to work because dad can't afford all of the kids and they have to find some level to support themselves. And then you've got kids like Logan, who spends most of his time having to take care of his kids. And even to this day, Logan plays the role of father to his siblings, and he shouldn't have to. Like, I'm glad that Janelle has Logan, but he shouldn't have to be the father. He should be allowed to just be Logan. He should have been allowed to just be a kid. He should have been allowed to not have to take on all of those responsibilities as a child. They would say that they liked teaching their kids responsibility, but honestly, it's like they would say that because they had to find a silver lining of it. Did they want to have their children doing it? No, but they had to because that was their reality. That's how Christine grew up, so that's all she knew. That's how Mary grew up, so that's how she knew. But that's not how Janelle grew up. But Janelle didn't have a dad around, so she felt like a dad being around a third of the time was enough. It's sad all the way around, but Ben is literally speaking facts here. There's not love being multiplied actually divides families.
I think it's also really interesting to pay attention to the body language of everyone involved as they're talking, because there's a lot of sort of saying the right things and then shaking the heads no. Like at one point, Christine is talking about how she's so excited for, Robyn and Kody to do the thing because gosh darn it, they better. And she's shaking her head like this. Gosh darn it, they better. This narrative that I hear over and over and over again in that episode, which is that women are the ones choosing this, but it's always a man saying that. Like Kody says, my mom chose this worldview. He tells that story. He talks about how Mary chose us. There's a lot of talking by men about how the women are the ones in charge and that the women are in choice and that the women have freedom. And isn't it great how much freedom the women have? There were quite a few things in this episode that really rubbed me the wrong way. One of them was when everyone is like chasing a little Gwen around trying to pull her teeth, even though she's obviously said no. And this is just a real clear example of the total lack of bodily autonomy that exists in Mormon culture. Basically, Mormonism teaches you, grooms you from a very young age to override people's physical boundaries all the time. It's actually a key part of the Mormon temple experience is to be physically touching people without their knowledge or consent in a way to override their bodily autonomy. I see that a lot in that episode with the Gwen thing, with Kody demanding kisses and hugs from people, even though they don't really want to. It's just weird and uncomfortable. It was also really disturbing how often Kody referred to Mary as being the bait, because number one, Mary's a person, and number two, what do you use bait for?
It's interesting, right? He's seen a lot of what you and I have seen on the show, where it's like we're seeing that they're saying something, but you can tell they're saying something differently or they're feeling something differently. With like Christine saying she wants Kody to have sex with Robyn, but that's not the truth. And the fact that the women all say that they chose this, which is not true. They're groomed and indoctrinated to choose it. They're told that they have to choose it. They're told that they should accept a man that already has another wife, and that's who they should marry. And the other part that I thought was interesting here is where he's talking about how Gwen, in that episode, they're chasing her around the house trying to pull out a tooth, and she doesn't want them to pull the tooth out yet. And sort of saying that kind of overrides this idea that like body autonomy doesn't exist in the system. Now, he was probably triggered by that. I didn't necessarily see that as like, I don't know, I don't see it in that worldview, but maybe that's something that he experienced. And it's just an example to him of like, this is how they're not respecting Gwendolyn's boundaries. But also he mentions that Kody like demands kisses from people, demands people that touch him, calling Mary the bait. Finally, someone in the family literally calling it out and saying it's kind of gross that Kody would call her the bait because she is a woman. I cut out the clip where he was talking about how in the system of polygamy, it's almost impossible for men not to become narcissists because it's built around the man, and the entire show is built around Kody and his experience. So it's all about Kody, his wives, his kids, his car, his experience, his narrative. And how that's very detrimental to both men and women because it places men in a godlike position, and no one, given that amount of attention and told that they're infallible and that it's all about them, would be not susceptible to becoming narcissistic as a result. And I've heard that over and over and over again. Like, men in this culture become narcissists because of how they're told that they are the center of the universe. And you and I can say that like nobody is the center of the universe, but in this system, they have no one else telling them differently. Like if their whole lives are centered around them and their whole family is centering their lives around him, he doesn't have to give in to anybody because he is the center. He is the God and he is the narcissist, which is what Ben is saying. I'm finally hearing someone in the family say it without sidestepping. And Ben, in the same recap, also talks about how there's this part of polygamy where you're told not to say things publicly because you need to protect the family, you need to protect polygamy. And so you don't hear things about what happens in the family because you're not protecting the family, you're not protecting polygamy, you're not protecting the faith, you're not protecting the family's name, which makes it harder for people to speak out because then they're shamed and degraded and people don't believe them, which is kind of what Ben says he's experienced. I mean, even McKelty has said that she doesn't necessarily believe what Ben went through. Like, how do you question Ben's experience when that's his experience?
That part where Christine says that she really loved Kody a lot and he kind of loved her is very indicative of what's to come. It's polygamy in a nutshell. The women all are supposed to love the men, and the men are sort of supposed to love the women, kind of. And it's also indicative of the way that polygamy brainwashes young girls into believing that marrying married men is preferable to marrying single men. This is something that's happened to multiple of my sisters, and my dad has kind of made that happen by using his priesthood authority to give them blessings, which are basically like prophetic visions of their future, telling them that they'll marry someone who's already married. So then they do later on in their life, and they choose it, but they've been groomed to think that since they were like 3.
So Kody's job is to collect a lot of women so that he can get into heaven, and he doesn't actually have to like all of the women because he's going to collect more. And if he doesn't get along with one, he can always just push them out to the pasture because, you know, he'll get a younger one. And women are supposed to love the man and just supposed to accept how they're treated and what they get. And as he says, his sisters are told from a young age by their father that he receives a blessing from God, that these girls are supposed to marry a married man. So if a father is telling his daughter a prophetic vision of, I've been told that you will marry a married man since the time she's 3, like he said, by the time they're an adult, of course she'll say she wants to marry a married man because it's the only thing she knows. She doesn't know any different, and she's accepted that this is what her dad wants, who is the God. And she's in a system, in a structured environment where no other outside forces or voices are allowed to speak or be heard. It's like, I've been waiting for someone in this family to address these specific topics, to actually say the parts that I have been saying out loud on this channel for years, to say it. And not someone that's a woman, right? You have family members like, say, Kristen Decker, who speaks about her experience and what she revealed and how she experienced polygamy as a child and as a plural wife. But she wasn't part of Kody Brown's family, right? So she's not related to Kody. She isn't a family member of Kody. She doesn't have connections to Kody's parents or Kody's siblings. And so this is just a different perspective because, one, he can speak to not only Kody, because Kody and the family did live in Wyoming on the compound along with Ben for a while. And two, he can sort of cross-reference that to his own experience with his father and how his dad and Kody are very similar. And they're all doing the same things, right? So I'm just like, I want to scream yes, 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 finally someone is saying this. And he's going to get backlash from Kody. But I kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe something has changed, because a couple years ago, he wouldn't have wanted to say these things about Kody. And maybe the fact that Garrison passed away and Kody is just sort of la 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 going on with life like nothing happened changed his view. I don't know. I can't say. But a couple years ago, Ben would not have said this about Kody.
Also, the way that they introduced this idea of Robyn into the family was uncomfortable for me, because it felt like it was about getting everyone to agree rather than letting everyone have an equal voice about what they thought. I want to give mad props to my cousin Aspen for speaking up. She was like, it's just weird. Thank you for saying the quiet part out loud. It is just weird. And there was something in that conversation that was really icky to me, which was this little clip of Kody saying, hey, this is family business, so we're not going to talk about it outside. This is family business. And that's part of the secret keeping that's just enmeshed in Mormon culture. That there's a face that we show the outside world, and then there's what happens on the inside, and that just breeds abuse throughout that culture. It's really awful. And it makes it really difficult for people like me who start to speak up about that abuse, because we're airing the family business for the world, and that's not cool, because it's family business. And family business, it leads to lives of incongruence, because there's this public image that you're supposed to present, and then there's the private truth of what's actually happening. And that creates a real lack of integrity in Mormon culture, because we're supposed to present this really good facade, but see, really what's happening is manipulation, abuse, neglect, just sadness.
If you go back and you watch the first episode and when Kody's telling them about Robyn joining the family, it is very obvious that there are children in that family that do not want it to happen. It's very clear that they're upset, but they can't say no. Like they can't voice their concerns about there's too many kids, I don't get enough time with you. Why are we going to do this? Mom just had to declare bankruptcy. We don't have enough food. I'm already taking care of all of the kids, Dad. Thanks, says Logan. You know, you can tell that there's kids in there that do not want to say yes, but they can't say no because Kody is the center of the universe and he's forcing it on them, right? So, and then he's telling them, after he's telling them that she's going to join the family, that they can't tell anyone. It's family business. So you have to protect the secret. You can't tell anyone that this is what Daddy's doing, which inevitably is proof that what he was doing was wrong. Like if you're doing something and you stand by what you're doing and it's built on morality and integrity, you wouldn't have to hide it from other people. If you were making a good decision for your family, you wouldn't have to have your kids keep it a secret. When you force your children to keep secrets about what's happening in your household, they're not going to be able to differentiate between something that's abusive and something that's not abusive. So if you're telling them like, I'm going to go do this and everyone, you're going to be okay with it, but don't tell anyone. And then if you do tell someone, you're told that you're airing out family business and you're not protecting the image of polygamy and of Mormonism, which is about, you know, part of their faith is about becoming the perfect versions of themselves and being as perfect as possible and having the best image. And so you never want to tarnish that image. You don't want anyone to know the truth, the seedy, disgusting abuse and neglect and awfulness that's happening in this world. You want to make it look perfect, right? And so children are being groomed to learn how to lie and to not understand what abuse is and not to know that they can say no. They're not taught boundaries. They're not taught autonomy. They just have to accept things. And you can't tell me that anyone in this family of those women wanted Robyn to join the family. I don't agree with that at all. I don't believe Mary wanted Robyn in the family. I don't believe Christine wanted Robyn in the family. And I certainly don't think Janelle wanted Robyn in the family. I think that that's the story that Kody has told on this on the show for how many of her seasons it's been, 18. I think he had to tell that because it would look terrible if we're like, yeah, I'm going to force my family to accept this woman who's ultimately going to destroy the family because I'm going to leave everyone for her. I mean, it was better for him to say, Mary decided that this was going to come in and Mary gave me the go ahead because Mary was the bait, because it's taking all of the responsibility off of him and he's not the bad guy. And then the women are taking the fall looking like fools. And then when they're crying and sad because he's doing this, they're told, but you agreed to this. It's just like gaslighting all the way around. And Aspen did say it was weird. And some of the family members were not down with it at all, you know? And they've said today now that they were told to sit down, shut up, and accept it, which never works. And it's no wonder why the family has split and fractured. And it's no wonder why some of the Brown children didn't accept Robyn's kids because they didn't want to accept them. They didn't, like, why are you adding more kids to our family, Dad? We already don't see you ever, you know? And then when he does bring them in, he spends all his time with them. Ben's TikTok is phenomenal, so go and check out the full video. I think he's going to be doing more, and he's going to be doing season 19. So I'm just grateful that someone in the family is finally saying it, and I'm not the only one like on this like soapbox constantly saying like they're lying, they're not telling the truth. Like he's confirming what I've reported. So what are your thoughts about it? Make sure to give some comments on the topic. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click on the bell so you never miss a video. Bye guys.